floor over to Koen and Marya to kick off today's proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Jihad. It's my pleasure and my honor to introduce Marya today. We've known each other for quite some years, and I'm also befriended with her husband, Adriano Berengo, who will she explain in more detail what he does. But as far as Marya is concerned, you could say that she's like a real world citizen. She's Lebanese Canadian artist who grew up in Beirut and completed degrees in interior architecture and fine arts at the Lebanese American University. And in 1992, her family fled the war by emigrating to Montreal. And then in 2001, she moved to New York and completed an MFA in fine arts at the School of Visual Arts. And now she's based in Venice, Italy, where she has her own studio. Her work is very interdisciplinary. Her pieces are mainly installations and performances, and often a combination of both. But 3D reliefs, paintings, drawings, and photos support her installations and performances. Every work has its own narrative and is a story derived from a personal journey, her childhood memories, and her cultural background. She explores and plays with the concepts of time and space by blurring their boundaries, and her ideas are formed through poetically unconscious collective imagery and references. Marya's art is based on her personal perception of reality. She creates parallel worlds that explore the macro and the micro, the extremely beautiful and the extremely repugnant. She uses a variety of different materials like fabric, bamboo, plastic, paper, and of course glass, and whatever else inspires her. She works on transforming them, giving them nobility, new life, and new meaning. She has embraced the Murano glass medium since 2001, when she started collaborating with Berengo Studio, Murano Glass Factory, and the Berengo Foundation and the Biennale Glasstress show. Marya also recommended other artists to work in glass and to take part in Glasstress exhibition. She worked on the artist projects, helping them develop a personal language. And of course, she also creates her own work. Her work has been shown internationally in galleries, museums, and biennales, and it's way too many to mention them all, but I'm just going to give you like a handful of them. The 51st Venice Biennale in 2005 with the solo show Personal Living Space, the Pushkin State Museum of Fine Arts in 2006, the Museum of Modern Art in Klagenfurt in Germany in 2006, the Sharia Biennale 8 in 2007, the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2008, the Poznan Biennale in Poland in 2008, the 53rd Venice Biennale in 2009, and she represented the city of Venice at the 54th Venice Biennale in 2013 with a major commission. Her work is also included at the Boca Raton Museum of Art 2017, the Fondazione Berengo in 2020, and she has taken part in several group shows and solo shows internationally in the Middle East, Europe, and the USA. A new installation is currently under view in the Boca Raton Museum of Art. So as you can tell, like many things to talk about, very experienced in the glass world and especially in the contemporary glass world. So I'm very much looking forward to this lecture. Marya Kazoun, welcome.
Thank you, Koen. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Today, I would like to take you through the amazing story of how glass and art came into being at the Berengo Studio factory in Murano, Venice, and how glass came to be a medium of contemporary art. I'm going to start by showing you a video of a First Nation American artist, Jimmy Durham, who talks about the glass medium.
I think glass is one of the really strange things of our universe. It is absolutely strange. Melted sand, what an idea. I think the biggest challenge is still the biggest challenge. It doesn't change. And it is that glass is too pretty. It is a big problem because the prettiness of the glass takes over. It's very easy to make something that's only pretty. To make something shallow or banal, or to make something that's just pretty. My idea of glass is that it is interesting when it is broken, because the brokenness vibrates and is a little dangerous always. So it's not only pretty, but usually when glass is broken, it's prettier. But at the same time, you want to stand back a little bit. You don't want to be bothered by it. And it wants to announce itself to you absolutely. I think that is what has happened here. Not because Silvano misinterprets, but because he interprets in a very good way, because I asked him to make 8 heads that were kind of like a jaguar head. I had a drawing, and he started out from the drawing, but he had to make 8 of them over 2 days, and each one changed, so that he has not seen them all together, and I have not either. But I know that when we do, in 2 days, we will see really a big change. They're not alike. It's moving, yeah, it's metamorphosizing. I'm afraid of heights and nothing else in the world.
As many of you know, until the mid-20th century, glass was considered only as a material for functional objects. Its aesthetic value was measured according to the technical difficulty of making it. For this reason, works in glass were relegated for a long time among the applied arts. But all this changed with Adriano Berengo, my husband, who can best be described as a cultural entrepreneur. Adriano is a Venetian who had made its mission to bring together contemporary artists and glass blowers to make work of art in glass. Adriano was inspired by Peggy Guggenheim, who is the niece of Solomon Guggenheim, the founder of the Guggenheim Foundation. Her palazzo, or home here in Venice, is now a museum housing her modern art collection. So Adriano was inspired by Peggy. She experimented in the 50s and 60s with Costantini, a man who had the idea of making art in glass, and went knocking on Peggy's door. He knew that Peggy's friends were all artists and she had a flair for good art. Cocteau, who also made glass with Costantini, named this furnace Fucina degli Angeli, the forge of the angels. In the Fucina degli Angeli, glass was introduced to modern artists like Armand, Arp, Calder, Marc Chagall, Max Ernst, Cocteau, and Picasso, and broke the barrier that had limited glass to its traditional decorative role. Over here, you can see Peggy Guggenheim with Costantini. The artist of the 50s and 60s. But this furnace no longer existed, and its site was home to a restaurant. So Adriano grasped the powerful potential of creating a place where artists could feel free to experiment and explore new possibilities. He founded the studio in 1989 with glass floors ready to act as an artist's hand. His glass maestros could act as translators, guided by the vision of an artist to manifest a new kind of art in glass. Before I show you his facility, I will show you photos of glass furnaces at the beginning of the 1900s. This is still Costantini with Fontana, and you see a work of art on the top right. This is a work by Calder. Marc Chagall and Max Ernst. Max Ernst was the lover of Peggy Guggenheim at the time. And these are the early photos of the early 1900s. This is when Queen Elizabeth visited Murano in '61. And here are images of Adriano's furnace facility. So the facility is composed of a space to mix the chemicals, the oxide and the sand, the silica. Each color has a different recipe, and those recipes were kept secret in the past. Each furnace has its own red, own blue, and own green. On the left, you can see the different canes with the different colors. Those are used to make colors in case little small quantities are needed. Nowadays, colors are not a mystery for anybody. Standard recipes for colors are available, but still some furnaces try to personalize their color palette by dosing the different oxides of minerals. So the mix is made at the end of the day and poured in the furnaces that are kept on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The next morning, the glass is ready to be worked by the maestros. In the past, glassblower had a special place in the nobility of Venice. They could become noble, and they were allowed to marry a noblewoman. So in the main furnace space, there is one big furnace that you can see here in the photo, in this picture here, okay, where 800 kilograms of lead crystal are fused and ready for use daily, and two small furnaces within which we have 8 crucibles with 8 different colors and canes that can be fused. There are also 2 glory holes, 2 annealers, and actually 3 annealers. And on the bottom left, you can see, in the center, you can see the electrical furnace. In this furnace here, in the electrical furnace, you can fuse actually solid glass chunks. After finishing the making of an artwork, it is transferred to the annealer so it is able to adjust slowly to room temperature. This process actually takes up to 2 or 3 days usually. This is a bit frustrating because you can't see your finished work right away. So you can see the annealer on the lower right here in this picture. So here you have a glory hole, you have a furnace, electrical furnace, and annealer. So in this central place here, the 2 teams of 3 people each work full-time usually. Now with COVID, there's only 1 team going on. As you can see, the setting of the maestro station is a bench, tools like the blowpipe, the shears, the newspaper pads, and the torches. You can see the tools here and the torch. When a piece is finished, it is taken to the space called moleria, where all the imperfections are taken away, along with the glass that is left on the piece by the blowpipe. You can see the different machines used to polish, cut, or make hole in the glass, as you can see on the top right photo. No, actually it's here on the lower right photo. You see this man here is trying to make a hole on this glass piece. So when an artist is invited to make glass, he or she would discuss the project he proposes or she proposes with Adriano. The making of an edition. or a one-of-a-kind piece is defined with him. Then an intermediary person is there to introduce the medium to the artist and to help him translate and communicate with the glass blower. It is sometimes Adriano, sometimes myself, and sometimes other collaborators who fill this role. I will show you one of the earliest and most successful collaborations Adriano had with an artist, Kiki Koenig. In 1994, Kiki Koenig was one of the first artists he invited to experiment with glass. Adriano had seen a glass sculpture, actually no, a wax sculpture of her in a window front gallery in Austria. He went in and bought it. He brought it to Venice, translated into glass sculpture, and brought it back to the gallerist, who was so amazed by the result. She agreed to get in touch with the artist and told her about the glass work she had just seen. And so she came to Murano and made a large series of works over the next couple of years. Kiki was the pop artist of Austria. She lived in the 50s and the 60s in New York City and knew everyone in the art world: Larry Rivers, Tom Wesselmann, Klaus Oldenburg, Roy Lichtenstein, Andy Warhol, and many others. Kiki was an important figure for Adriano's development. Her Venetian heads proved to be also a great achievement for her too. Let me show them to you. So here you can see the drawing of a piece and then the result in glass. This is her in the early 90s making this piece. So you see, it starts from the drawing. She shows the drawing to the glass blower, and the glass blower tries to interpret it as best as he can. This is another example. Here's what Kiki said once. Initially, I was a little skeptical. Glass was a totally new material for me. My attitude changed completely. However, when I visited Adriano's Berengo's furnace, I immediately was intrigued by the great variety of working techniques and the potential glass offered. While I worked with a master glass blower, Adriano was always on my side, not only to translate my suggestions into Italian, but also to convince the master that he could do something completely new using traditional techniques. This process was far from easy, and without Adriano, my heads would not have turned out to be so well. The Venetian heads are the outcome of this successful collaboration. The next slides I'm going to show you are other early collaborations from the early 90s. Here is Martin Bradley, Pino Castagna, Riccardo Licata. And here is a work by artist Koen van Mechelen, whose artistic medium is the chicken, which he uses in his art as a metaphor for humankind. He crossbreeds chicken from all different countries to have new generations of different chickens. In this image, he crossbred two glass realities. This chicken's head and legs are made in Murano, and the body is made in Ireland at the Waterford Crystal Factory. He made glass crossing with different glass realities from around the world. For the past 30 years, Adriano has invited over 300 artists from around the world to work with the maestros on Murano. First, it was artists from the visual arts, but then, recognizing that creativity had no discipline, he began to invite architects, designers, fashion designers, and even musicians like Pharrell Williams, and all came and made works of art in glass. In order to show this incredible work to the art world, the Glasstress exhibition was created. The first show was in 2009, when Adriano was given the opportunity to realize an exhibition in the magnificent Palazzo Franchetti, a neo-Gothic palazzo on the Grand Canal of Venice, a space he had coveted for years. This is an image of the central space. A second venue to Glasstress show took place in a very old glass factory. The space had not been working furnace for decades, but it still had the old glory holes, the smokes on the windows, and the graffiti of the workers. I'm going to show it to you just a second. Here it is. His ambition is that in the near future, that magical old furnace space will become a museum dedicated to house a permanent collection of contemporary artworks made by his studio. I'm going to show you another picture. Palazzo Franchetti and the old furnace space have since become the home of Glasstress and also Fondazione Berengo, a foundation he recently founded as a cultural institution to support artistic endeavors and especially to further the mission to preserve the centuries-old traditions of glassmaking on Murano, while taking glass to its rightful place as a medium of fine arts. The foundation also partners with prominent institutions around the world, presenting cultural exhibitions like the exhibition at Boca Raton Museum on show there right now. So in the first exhibition, Glasstress 2009, it focused on the historical perspective of contemporary art in glass and showed how glass, mostly unnoticed, had penetrated in the art world from the beginning of the last century till the present. I will quote what the New York Times said. Glass is now being taken up by an increasingly wide spectrum of contemporary artists. So over here, this is a view of the main space. You can see here, you can recognize the work of Koen van Mechelen, who made a chicken half stuffed and half in Murano glass. And on the back here, you can see the work of French artist Orlan, who filled those glass frames with bodily fluids that are the result of aesthetic surgeries. So we borrowed from this wide spectrum and found extraordinary example of early glass work from collectors and museums, works by such famous artists as Joseph Albers, Yanis Kounelis, Man Ray, Anton Pavsner, César, Louise Bourgeois, Dan Graham, Lucia Fontana, Daniel Burin, Pennone, and Rauschenberg. So here are, okay, you see, so this is the work of Rauschenberg, the tires. The work of Man Ray, Pandora's Box. Joseph Albers. And The Couple by Louise Bourgeois. But as Adriano's mission was not just to recognize this history, but show the exciting future of glass, a new energizing contemporary perspective, he included very experimental new works of artists I recommended, like Soyeon Cho and Antibody, who made their own installations. This is the photo of Soyeon Cho, who uses ready-made material. And this is the work of Antibody, who draws on the back of mirrors, and her process is very interesting. This is a detail of it. Other artists came to Murano and realized new works for the show in his furnace. You can see here a site-specific work by Daniel Burin entitled Photo Souvenir. And here you have Holy Dung Beetle with Laurel Tree by Jan Fabre. For every following edition of Glasstress, there was a different curatorial theme, different curator, different partnerships with institutions. When all these invited artists were asked to work with glass, each addressed it differently. Some used it directly in their work, like Tony Cragg and Jan Fabre. So here you see a work by Tony Cragg in the making. And many others in an indirect form, like this piece of music entitled Glasstress, created by the group Subsonica. This is the final work of Tony Cragg. And I'm gonna make you listen to 1 minute of the soundtrack. They made the music, recording all the noises of glassmaking in the furnace. Another stunning work from that show is Fred Wilson Yago's mirror in black glass. His work reflects on race. For this piece, we had to go to a mirror maker to make it. So we tried to offer the artist all the skills available on this island. You can see the exquisite detail on the right. Glasstress 2009 was a shock to the art world because it shifted attention from the material itself to the ideas expressed in glass, and people marveled at the works, the concepts, and the art. Glass had made its surprising debut in the art world. My role is to introduce and recommend interesting artists to show in Glasstress, artists I admired and I had shown with in different exhibitions around the world. When my husband came to visit me while I was still in New York City, we would always go to visit Chelsea galleries and art grad schools, open studio, and look at the work of emerging artists. I will show you more works from the different Glasstress exhibitions. So this is Glasstress 2011. On the right, you can see the garden view with a narrow house by Erwin Worm. And this is 10,000 years old turtle by Zhan Huan. We made the glass elements and the tons of ashes were shipped from China. In 2011, we also realized and showed for the first time the famous artwork called Caroña by Javier Perez, Spanish artist. The chandelier was made in Murano in the historical Rizzonico style, which maybe some of you are familiar with. I think this was the first performance by a chandelier. It went to the ceiling and then crashed on the floor. What's the meaning? You can decide. A tradition crashed and destroyed, glass in the color of blood, as if it was alive, but now it is being fed to ravens, a death body, as the title implies. The next image I'm going to show you are the Berengo heads by Thomas Schutte, made in cast glass, one of the first works made with that technique. This next image is a slide of a work by Antonio Riello, an Italian artist. And each one of these vessels you see are ashes of books the artist burned. And you can also see the engraving of the book's title and the author's name on each one of these vessels. And here's another site-specific work by Fred Wilson, who made this work. This room of the Palazzo had works by Venetian master Longhi hanging on the walls. Longhi was a Venetian painter who painted interiors with figures. Fred Wilson had the painting reproduced in black glass and had holes cut out for every face in the Longhi paintings. In 2011, we also showed the moving work by South African artist Kendall Gears, his wall of police truncheons. Glasstress 2013 was subtitled White Light, White Heat and was produced in collaboration and partnership with the prestigious Wallace Collection in London and London College of Fashion. In Glasstress 2013, we tried to build a bridge between fashion, art, and glass. This is a space in Murano. Because of its close connection to London, many of the young British artists, which was an important art movement in England, were included in the show. We have two of Matt Collishaw's works here in this show. You can see it here on the slide on the right. It's a video work inside this ornate black glass frame. I understand that one of Collishaw's mirror is in the permanent collection of the Louvre. And on the left is the work of Helen Story, The Dress of Glass and Flame. The next work here is of Cornelia Parker, another of the young British artists. She did Decoy, the drum, entirely made of glass. And here is Lucy and Jorge Orta, whose works are about environmental issues. They replicated Amazonian flowers in glass. This is entitled Perpetual Amazonia, Tree of Life. The next work here is of Lebanese artist Ayman Balbaki, who was invited to take part in the show. And here I would make a parenthesis to talk about the casting technique next. The casting technique was developed to accommodate the artists who wanted precise works or reproductions of specific objects, or simply they didn't want to come to work with Murano glass and wanted a real precise reproduction of their idea. I'm going to show you here a small video, a short video explained by Alan Horsley, our casting specialist.
So this is where we begin the process of transforming artists' models or their designs into pieces in cast or kiln formed glass. So here we have lots, a part of our production work over the last couple of years, original models, molds, works in progress, from lots of the artists that you might be familiar with from Glasstress and from collaborations with Berengo. These are all the tools that we use to register and recreate the sculptures that artists send us. We could be doing anything from a design piece one day through to a series of human bones the next, with some abstract sculptures thrown in the middle. You know, there's a real variety in the kind of work that goes on in this workshop. Variety in scale, complexity, subject matter, and hopefully today we'll have a chance to see some elements of that and give you a sense of the general process that we might use to take an artwork from an original model through to a piece in glass. This is one of the molds which we use for reproducing the original sculptures of the artist in wax. Inside here is a silicon skin. This contains a rubber impression of all of this detail, and into that rubber impression we pour the wax to duplicate this form. We've cleaned the mold, the silicon part of the mold, which is the flexible part that has all of the information from the sculpture captured within it. So it has no kind of rigidity of its own, so we need to install it back inside its supporting case. This is a really important stage where we take the finished sculpture, the finished model in wax, and we add a system of vents using different materials that allow us to create paths for the air that's inside the empty mold to escape and allow the glass to flow in and take on all of these details. Once we have the wax completed, we begin the process of coating it in a refractory plaster, which will then become the mold, which forms the glass once the glass is melted inside the kiln. We have lots of different ingredients that we combine together to create this refractory plaster, and we vary those depending on the applications. We calculate the ratios of the different ingredients, and we work very hard to maintain consistency in that. Every time we cast a piece, we know it will come out the same. We can be repeatable, which is one of the big strengths of the casting process. We now have the model with all of its vents attached, and it's just going to have a final check and quick clean before we begin applying the refractory plaster. We're slowly building up layer upon layer of refractory plaster. The whole thing will be heated up. We'll melt the wax away from the inside of this, and that will leave us with a negative space, a negative of the sculpture. So that we are casting molds. Think of that, the glass will be melted, it will flow, it will push the air out of all of these vents here, and it will make all the shape. Time to add reinforcement. This allows us to make a mold that's very strong without being very thick. This will spend a little time drying, and then we will begin the process of cleaning it, taking the wax away. So it will be heated up, the wax will melt, and that will leave us that clean negative, which can then be put into the kiln and have the glass contained above it, let everything melt and flow in.
I'm going to show you example of casted works. So here you have the Frozen Vanitas by Dutch artist Hans op de Beek. In his Naturemort here, some elements are casted and some were made in Murano glass and then sandblasted. It's a very beautiful piece. This is a photo of Cabaret Crusade, the Battle of Hattin, 1187 by Wael Shawki. This is a low relief. He had it first carved out in wood that was then used to make the rubber negative, to then make the positive with wax, then again with a negative with plaster, and melting in the positive in wax. Then plaster will be used to fill it fillet it with glass and fuse it. So it's a long process to cast. The next two works you're going to see are by the same artist, Jaume Plensa. This is Misty Head. You can see all the details are there. And this is Silence.
Can you close it so it doesn't let in little beasties?
This is Up Yours by Ai Weiwei. In Glasstress 2015, we saw another exciting partnership with the prestigious State Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. The curator, Dmitry Ozerkov, who is the director of the Hermitage Contemporary Art Department, called 2021, curated Glasstress 2015 Gothica and invited 53 artists from over 25 countries to create works in glass in a Gothic mood. In this exhibition, I invited and worked on the pieces of Iraqi artist Adel Abidine, Lebanese artist Ayman Balbaki, American artist Pira Coyne, and Syrian-American artist Diana Al-Hadid. I helped develop her artwork and in a glass language. I'm going to show you the works of, this is another overview of the main floor in the Palazzo Franchetti. You have works by artists Gilles Delbois and Johanna Vasconcelos here, who covers all of her art with crochet. So here's the work of Adel Abidine, who recreated these torture masks in glass. And this is the work of Pira Coyne, who recreated the mood and decadence of the house of Mrs. Havisham in Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. This is Chevaux de Frise, Homage to Apollinaire by Ayman Balbaki, who made this medieval barrier. So this is not cast, it's Murano glass, and it's etched here. This is The Suburbs by Diana Al-Hadid. In her case, she could not come to follow her piece herself, so she sent us those two paintings you see on the left with the exact scale and measurements. So we developed the work. The lines you see in her paintings were made with glass filaments, reproducing the paintings on the left. The coloring was made with colored glass powder poured on the figures. In this case, the flat electrical furnace was used to fuse the filaments and the glass powder on the glass base. So I also followed up with the works of Egyptian artist Wael Shawki. The stars of this show are the glass marionettes. Over a period of 3 months, we made over 120 fully articulated glass marionettes that were then main characters of the third and final film of Shawki's Cabaret Crusade trilogy of films, which told the story of the crusade from the Arab perspective. I'm going to show you another one of them. So the marionettes are fully articulated. Eyes, arms, legs, and mouth move, and they're imbued with an uncanny motility and vitality. All of the cloths of the marionettes are made with natural cloth, natural fabric, like cotton, silk, or wool. We had a costume maker custom make these clothes, and a metalsmith to do the armors and the swords. So this is in the making. You see here, they're gluing the eyes and trying to connect the pieces together. We had a team of puppeteer come and stay for 6 months to complete the work. The inspiration for Wael for his marionettes were the African sculptures on show at the African section of the Metropolitan Museum in New York City. So that's him here, following up with his work. And this is Maestro Silvano making a head, you can see here. I'm going to show you a video of Wael talking about his pieces and about glass.
I think glass is extremely difficult material to work with, extremely difficult. For me, glass is not only about making something looks nice. It's really more about its historical content. And the idea here is connected to the Venetian history and the involvement of the Venetians in the Fourth Crusades. So to link between his history that I am making in a film and to put this history into a medium and material is what is making for me this work extremely heavy. It's not only a shape, a look. It's much more than this. I think the way to work with glass is to have a reason to work with glass. And this reason has to connect to its chemical content and its history and all of everything. But if you work with glass only as interesting, transparent material and you lose its functionality and its historical reference, it becomes a decorative element. No matter what, no matter even if the artist is great. But this is not the point, because it's not about this. It's not about being great. It's the material is extremely difficult. challenge, and I'm happy that I think our work succeeded.
So in his work, every glass element, like the arms, the legs, they were first made by a ceramist, okay, in collaboration with specialists in puppet making. So they could know exactly what are the pieces that needed to be done and what kind of measurements they needed to be in, and where the holes to put the strings needed to be. So it took a long time to do this project. I'm going to show you next the work of Sun Dong. This is here first, Wael Shouki and Adriano discussing. And this is the chandelier of Sun Dong. Okay, he's a contemporary Chinese artist. He made this work and entitled Glass Big Brother. You can see the chandelier's details image with the surveillance cameras here, with the irony and reflection on the Chinese government. The next work you're going to see is Fear of Reason by Turkish artist Yassam Sasmazer. No, actually, no, they're not in order. So you're seeing The Collective Memory by Koen van Mechelen first, here. This is the work Fear of Reason by Yassam Sasmazer. And the very ironical works of Erwin Worm, Bas, Mother, and Venetian Sausage. So in this case here, the top part was made in casting, and the bottom part as well, actually. This piece as well. This one was made in Murano glass. So you can also see the skills, how skilled the glass blowers are to reproduce a realistic object. In Glasstress 2017, French artist Loris Gréau made site-specific work entitled The Unplayed Notes Factory. He brought back the abandoned furnace, the abandoned glass furnace, okay, back to life within his immersive and performative solo exhibition, referring to chain work. His work included a glass blowing team, a furnace, and all the works you see on the ceiling were made during his performance by the glass blowers. This show included works by Ai Weiwei, who is one of the most famous artists of our times. This is entitled Blossom. This is very suggestive work by Monica Bonvicini, In My Hand. And the work by Iranian artist Shirazi Hushiari. To celebrate 10 years of Glasstress and 30 years of Berengo Studio, the exhibition Glasstress 2019 goes back to its historical roots on the island of Murano in the Berengo Foundation spaces. Here's the view of the exhibition. In this next view of this exhibition, you can see the work stamp by Abdel Nasser Gharim, a Saudi artist who used to work in the military, doing office work mainly, stamping paperwork for most of the day. So he uses a stamp a lot in his art now. He critiques subtly the Saudi government. This next photo here is Shitting Doves of Peace and Flying Rats by Jan Frab. The Endless Cycle by American artist Tim Tate, who plays a lot with illusion in his works. Expanded Access by Korean artist Michael Chu. And this is the work of Brazilian artist Vic Muniz. The work is made of murine, which is a Murano traditional pattern glass. So you can see the details here. This next photo is Bricolante by Pablo Reynoso. He reproduced the bricola, a symbol of the Venetian lagoon. So the art world was amazed, and institutions around the world invited us to collaborate with them in presenting Glasstress. I'm going to show you where it traveled. So this is Glasstress Riga. This is in Beirut, at the Beirut Exhibition Center when it was still there. This is at the Wallace Collection in London. This is the Museum of Art and Design in New York City in 2012. But besides Glasstress, every 2 years, the Fondazione Berengo organized other great exhibitions like Zaha Hadid's show in 2016. In 2020, during COVID, the Unbreakable Women in Glass show was organized, showcasing 65 women artists from around the world who have worked with Berengo Studio and its furnaces on Murano for over 30 years since the studio foundation in 1989. This is a photo of the work of Karen Lamont, Nocturne, and she makes her own glass work, and the work is really stunning. Here is the work on the right of Monica Bonvicini. It's called Bonded. The work Opus by Lolita Timofeeva that reflects on the current condition of the world. This work here is by Chiara Dinis. And now I will take the opportunity to show you my own work that was shown in this show, Wandering Stars, an installation made in August 2020 after the explosion in Beirut. I was not in Beirut during the blast, but my family and friends were there, and most of them, after a few hours of the blast, when I was able to get in touch with them, were sending me harrowing images and videos of the destruction of their homes, the chaos, the injuries, and I could only feel helpless, useless, and impotent. With the distance of time, I can see that there's a lot of direct references to what happened in Beirut and to the state of the world right now in this work. It is almost like if the world stopped, and this work invites the spectator to reflect upon the uncertainty of the times we're living in. This installation is very different from my other works, where life and living is very present through organisms, creatures, and beings. Here in this work, everything looks static and narrates a life that is no longer there. The work invites the viewer to look up to space, as used to do the populations from ancient times. They looked up to the sky to analyze their fate and their relationship to the planet they're living on. In this work, the celestial body is surrounded by traces of people gathering around it. It's a very meditative piece. One can see an extinct asteroid or celestial body that has arrived through Alphard Gateway, another installation performance I recently made, for which I will show you a video artwork. It's a gateway that connects the worlds I create in my installations to reality. So lately, I have been working on a new installation of praying mantises. I will show you a short segment of the making of one element, the part where the master glass blower is attaching the two parts of the body together. And I will tell you later more about the work. So the Memphis Squad originated from the city of Memphis, emerged in the frozen landscape of They Were There. I will show you a segment of the video of They Were There so you can understand what it is. This work is taking place in a post-apocalyptic future ice age caused by global warming and climate change. This installation performance I made for Glasstress in 2011. Okay. So the praying mantis is part of that world that I created before. So here I'm going to tell you a bit more about this. So the squad deploys in areas of turmoil and unrest. Those mantises mutated into a more robust and fearless species to survive in the new harsh conditions of the changed world. This new frozen world, They Were There, is a result of global warming and climate change. All of the squad's unit have wings but can't fly because of the low temperatures. I chose to work on the praying mantis because in Greek, the word mantis means he who is clairvoyant or diviner, he who interrogates the divinities about the future. And contrary to what we know about mantises, this mutated race is not aggressive at all. They don't eat each other. They use their antennas to sense violence or violent behaviors. They're not used to communicate among themselves. They also use those to communicate among themselves and to organize operations to maintain peace. So the Memphis Squad stands against all forms of contempt. They're there to restore order and safety. Through those antennas, they can neutralize any danger among the surviving species living now peacefully in the landscape of They Were There. I will show you other works I made in glass throughout the years. This work is entitled Self-Portrait. It is an open structure installation, meaning that it is site-specific, like all my works. It dialogue with space, with the space it inhabits. So the elements of the installation can change in position and number depending on the space. I'm going to show you single elements of it. And here is one of my earliest installation works I made in collaboration with Berengo Studio, an installation of glass bats on a site with real bats. This work here, Cyclops, is a translation in glass of another installation of Cyclops made of trash bags. They're the first beings I created that inhabit the parallel worlds I create. And last but not least is a video. I'm going to show you the video of a first installation performance I did for Glasstress 2009. It is entitled Habitat, Where He Came From. Another fragment of world taking place in the same time frame as the previous work I showed you. They were there. And this post-apocalyptic future age caused by global warming and climate change. But first, I'm going to show you another picture of Cyclops here. And the video piece of Habitat. And thank you everyone for listening in. I would be very happy to answer your questions. I'm going to stop screen sharing.
Thank you very much, Maria. That was a fantastic presentation. I'm sure there's some questions in the audience. If anybody has a question, you can either put it in the chat, or you can just like unmute yourself and ask the question directly. Maybe I want to start off with a few questions. So we see that there's a partnership between the artists and the maestros, but like maestros are not artists and artists are not maestros, and they sometimes are not familiar with each other's world. So how important is that communication between the two, and how important is to have that like intermediate person there?
So that is very important, but the important thing is when an artist comes, there's a person that receives him always. It's either me, my husband, or other collaborators in Berengo who introduce the artist to the glass material and go with the artist to the glass blower and start proposing the project and discussing the feasibility of the project with the glass blower as well. It is very important that he can plan how to make the work, because you cannot let everything, you cannot do anything at the last minute in glass. You have to plan for every movement. So sometimes a person is there to help with the translation, but most of the time after one day, I mean, the artist is able to communicate with gestures and able to communicate with the glass blower.
And then I can see how there might be some hesitancy amongst artists to work with this like for them usually new, but also very difficult and complex material. So how hard is it to convince artists who have never worked with glass to make a work of art in glass?
It wasn't hard because when a person comes in the furnace and sees the facility and sees how glass is made, and there's a fascination around the medium. And at the beginning, Adriano used to work with less famous artists, but still, I mean, he had made very interesting pieces so that he could introduce himself. You know, it was a good introduction card with a more contemporary and more established artist. Everybody now comes knocking on his door to ask him to make glass. So, yeah.
The word is spreading rapidly, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another question that I had is like, what criteria do you use to select your artists?
So, I mean, I'm interested in artists that make amazing work or very interesting works. And my husband is more interested in artists who make more commercial work, like contemporary commercial. You know, he thinks about selling, of course, because he has to maintain the facility and pay his employees and the glass blowers and the gas. So so he selects interesting artists and he evaluates, he sees what position they have on the market, if they have a market, if he's able to sell them. And depending, sometimes it's a gallery who comes to propose an artist, and sometimes it's the artist himself who comes in, or sometimes it's a collector that comes in and proposes an artist. So it's many different. It comes in a different form every time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very interesting. I didn't know that even like collectors would commission or propose artists.
They would sponsor artists that they like, you know, or that they collect. They would help them finance the making of other works. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
And I can imagine every artist has a different way of working, and especially with a complex medium like this, I can imagine that things not always go the way you hope for. And so I was wondering, are you ever disappointed about the result? And if so, then what do you do in that case?
Well, personally, you mean, or for other artists?
I guess for both, you know, like for yourself, but also what happens in the case of you invite an artist and they don't like the work, or you don't like the work, or.
I mean, you have to go and you have to make glass with a glass maestro. You have to be in a mindset where you have to know that it's a collaboration, it's a collaborative effort, and it's a dialogue. So you propose a sculpture, a drawing, or a 3D object to be made. So, and you explain to the glass blower how you want it, but sometimes the glass blower decides to interpret it differently or use things differently. I mean, you have to be open for happy accidents also.
I see, meanwhile, there's like a lot of very wonderful comments appearing. No questions so far.
No questions.
No questions so far. But I'm gonna ask one more maybe.
Yeah.
Does Berengo also present work from pieces that are not made in the Berengo Studio, and how important is that?
Absolutely, he invites artists who make interesting work in glass also themselves. You know, not all artists come into Murano and make the work there, but for the show, he invites them to show a finished work that he had seen somewhere at a show somewhere or in an art fair.
Okay, I see there's a question coming in now. Are you planning Glasstress in 2021?
Yes, we're planning on it and we're working on it. We're trying to see the venue and how to do that.
So COVID is not going to stop you?
No.
Good. I don't know if Jihad has any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Marya. I was so impressed by your work with the Wandering Star that we decided to use it to announce the whole series. It's there on all of our materials. And I'm curious about the process you went through in making it. Okay, it doesn't look like anything that you have described in terms of processes in the lecture. So I'm very interested in how it actually came about as a process.
I went, so the process is, I love looking into the glass dumpster, okay? The glass dumpster has tons of, glass fragments, glass leftover that are really wonderful, So I picked a few, and then I needed more because I couldn't find more. And so I had the glass blower get to make glass leftover, okay? And so you see the, and I didn't use, how do you say, traditional way to work with the glass. I took a ball and I glued. I actually use Elmer's glue in a lot of my installations. So these are glass, the how do you say, the extinct asteroid, let's call it. So it's a ball of glass with glass shards glued to it. And the traces of the steps, the footsteps, they're all also glass leftovers that I glued together. So these are now, the next step is I'm going to fuse them so that they last forever, because Elmer's glue is Elmer's glue. It lasts a long time, but So.
I had a completely different idea of how the Wandering Star came about. So obviously you did a convincing rendering of the other process and I have in mind. But I should add actually that this way of bringing things together to form an asteroid, let's say, is not very far from the astrophysical perception of how some of these things came about, at least the bigger one. So this is very interesting. Okay, we speak of them, of some of these objects as the rubble piles. They sort of just come together.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting.
I mean, I did it delicately, but I used Elmer's glue, and I'm guessing now the next step now is to take these traces of footsteps and fuse them to see what happens.
Gravity has a way of doing things delicately as well. So
absolutely.
I had another question about how this initiative is actually pushing the experience and expertise of the glass blowers. They must not be particularly comfortable with all you're asking of them most of the time.
Well, actually, at the beginning, I mean, actually no, because they're used to now getting used to working with different artists every time, and it's a different project and every time, and they have to figure out solutions. So it makes them, I think they like it. They actually like it. The older glass blowers, it was a bit tougher. You had to use more, convincing ways to convince them to make something. But I think now with the younger generation, things are much easier, and they're interested and they're excited, and they meet new artists and artists from all over the world with different stories, and they come with wild projects. So
meanwhile, we also have some questions coming in from the audience. Tony Wang is asking, how's the influence of Glasstress to the Italian glass?
The Italian glass. So we've invited a few Italian artists. You saw, do you remember, I don't know, in the presentation, you saw the blade, the sword and the glass cube. Yes. So this was a work by Liliana Rosso. So Italian artists are invited as well, and they work with glass as well.
Well, but I guess what she means with the question is whether the Glasstress has an influence on the Italian
they became more aware of it. Now artists come and they want to work with glass, so they became much more aware of it. And I didn't show you all the works and the different Glasstresses, otherwise it would take ages. It would take maybe 5 presentations to show you. There would be, I think should be 1 presentation for each Glasstress. So each edition had around 40 to 50 artists, works that were made in the furnace, works that were borrowed, works that we saw were interesting, and we invited artists to show them. So
yeah, I've seen several of them, and they're fantastic shows. Like I can recommend it to everybody in the audience to go and see it in person if you have the opportunity. Sunny is also asking, is there glass art education program in Italy?
There's a glass school in Murano, but unfortunately it doesn't have lots of students, so it's having a hard time.
I guess it's similar in the rest of the world as well. Like
Yeah.
it's always
Yeah.
hard to get students because it's a difficult program and an expensive program. So
Yes. And it's not like where in other countries you have degrees in universities with for glass, you know.
And then another question, how do you approach recycled glass? Have you worked with artists who wanted to include antique, ancient glass with its history in the melting pot?
Actually, there was an Israeli artist who made beautiful vessels of using ancient glass, and other artists. Now on the top of my head, I don't remember artists using old glass. Actually, Pira Coin, in her work, she used old glass. We used leftovers of chandeliers to make the elements you saw in the big installation, the feminine, that she did.
Okay, that seems to be it for questions from the audience. I don't know if Jihad wants to add anything to this, or...
So I couldn't help but detect Marya's science fiction approach to art on one hand, and also apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic temperament. And now working in a place like Murano or Venice with threatening floods, fears of impending drowning of the whole big parts of the city, maybe the island, I don't know. How does it affect? How does it affect working conditions or people who are working there?
Well, I mean, it's always a big drama, but things go, you know, as usual. You have to deal with it. You have to deal with it. But I think also it's the fact that I grew up in Beirut. Also, I have this fascination with how do you say, rubble that becomes something super noble, and finding extreme beauty in extreme ugliness.
So Hassan is asking a question. When is a piece considered finished? And related to that, would some pieces continue evolving through chemical processes after the craftsman finished his work?
Actually, the piece is finished. When the artist decides that the piece is finished, then it's finished. For me, it's never finished, and I can still work on it forever. But for other artists, I mean, they decide that this is a project and this is the way it should be. And you feel when an artwork it's done, you know, you can feel it, you can sense it. You can sense if it's missing something or not. And evolving chemical processes, no, not really. But you have some glass that, you know, is a color, and then you melt it, and then you blow it, and it changes color. So you have to anticipate and know what is the result. So some colors, they look in their, how do you say, when they're cold, when they're ambient temperature, are different colors. When they're worked, the result is different.
Yeah, and I guess like glass is a very inert material, so it takes like maybe like 2,000-3,000 years before the atmospheric circumstances will start affecting it. So we see that with Egyptian glass maybe, but not on the short term, I imagine. So I think there's nothing left other than to thank you very, very much for this like wonderful presentation. We all enjoyed it very much, and from the response from the audience, they did as well. So thank you very much. Say hi to Adriano. And I don't know if Jihad want to have like a last word to say goodbye.
No, I'm very appreciative of the effort that Marya put in gathering this wonderful display for us. It gave us, I think, a very close impression of the process. It left me with a lot of questions and potential extrapolations, and I'm looking forward to her next works. Thank you, Marya.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening.